Lena Parker woke in silk sheets that weren't hers, in a room she didn't recognize, beside a man whose face could end lives with a single word. The charity gala was supposed to be her last catering shift before finally escaping the city, but one drunken wrong turn changed everything. She'd stumbled into Victor Romano's private suite, the ghost who ran the underworld from shadows. By morning, she learned the cruelest truth. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And Victor Romano never let accidents walk away. If you're ready for a story of dangerous obsession, impossible choices, and love born from captivity, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Grand Carlisle Hotel stood like a cathedral of old money and older secrets, its marble facade gleaming under streetlights that had witnessed a century of whispered deals and broken promises. Inside the crystal chandeliered ballroom, the annual Westbrook Charity Gala hummed with the particular energy of the wealthy, pretending to care about the poor for exactly one evening per year. Lena Parker didn't belong there, not as a guest anyway. She belonged in the service corridors, the kitchen staging areas, the invisible spaces where people like her made events like this possible while remaining carefully, deliberately unseen. At 24, she'd perfected the art of invisibility, moving through crowds with trays of champagne and canapes, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her black serving uniform designed to help her fade into the elegant wallpaper. Tonight marked her 37th consecutive day of work. 73 hours this week alone. 3 different catering companies, each one more demanding than the last, each one paying just barely enough to keep her afloat in a city that ate people like her for breakfast and didn't even notice the bones. "Parker, table 7 needs a refresh. Move!" Marco, the floor manager, snapped his fingers in her face like she was a dog. Lena bit back the response burning on her tongue and grabbed another tray of champagne flutes. Her feet screamed in the sensible black flats that had long since stopped being comfortable. Her lower back throbbed from hours of careful posture. Her smile felt painted on, cracking at the edges. The ballroom spun slightly. She'd worked through lunch and breakfast and dinner the night before. Coffee and adrenaline had stopped being enough somewhere around hour 60. "Champagne, sir." "Champagne, madam?" "Yes, it's Dom Perignon, vintage 2012. Smile, nod, disappear, repeat. The faces blurred together, surgically enhanced smiles, designer gowns worth more than her annual rent, conversations about vacation homes and investment portfolios floating past her like dialogue from a foreign film. These people existed in a completely different reality, one where money solved problems instead of creating them. By 11 o'clock, Lena's vision had developed a concerning tunnel quality. The edges of everything seemed softer than they should be. When she set down an empty tray and it clattered louder than expected, she realized with creeping horror that she might actually be drunk. Number. Not drunk. Exhausted, sleep-deprived, running on fumes in desperation, and the 3 hours of sleep she'd grabbed between yesterday's lunch shift and today's breakfast prep. "Last call for staff drinks," someone said behind the kitchen doors. Staff drinks. Right. That was the problem. During her break, her first and only break in a 12-hour shift, Lena had accepted the glass of wine offered by Simone, one of the senior servers. Just one glass. To take the edge off. To quiet the screaming in her feet and the ache in her shoulders and the growing panic about next month's rent. Except she'd forgotten she hadn't eaten. Forgotten that one glass on an empty stomach after 73 hours of work might hit differently. Forgotten that she was already running on nothing but caffeine and stubbornness. The second glass had appeared somehow. Or maybe she'd imagined it. Time had gotten slippery after that. By midnight, when Marco finally dismissed the servers, Lena could barely walk straight. The other staff members headed for the employee exit in a chattering cluster, but Lena's head spun too violently to follow the noise. She needed quiet, needed to sit down, just for a minute. The hotel sprawled in elegant confusion, ballrooms and conference rooms, restaurants and bars, luxury suites rising 15 stories above the glittering chaos. Lena had worked events here before. She knew there were employee rest areas scattered throughout the building, small, windowless rooms with worn couches where staff could grab 15 minutes between shifts. She just needed to find one. Sit down. Let the world stop tilting. The corridor stretched before her, carpeted in deep burgundy that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Wall sconces cast amber light that made everything look warm and dreamlike. Lena trailed one hand along the silk wallpaper, using it to steady herself as she walked. Room 1512, 1514, 1516. These were guest suites. She'd gotten turned around. The employee areas were somewhere else, somewhere down a different hallway, behind a different door. She should go back, find the right corridor. But her legs felt like water, and her head weighed approximately 300 pounds. And there, right there, was a door slightly ajar, spilling soft golden light into the hallway. Empty, her alcohol-soaked brain suggested. Abandoned. Perfect. Lena pushed the door open and stumbled inside. Her first impression was space, vast, impossible space. This wasn't a standard hotel room. It was a suite. A penthouse suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city skyline. Leather furniture in deep blacks and rich cognacs. Modern art that probably cost more than everything Lena had ever owned combined. And it was quiet. Blessedly, perfectly quiet. The bed called to her like a siren song. California King, covered in what looked like silk sheets in charcoal gray, pillows piled in careless luxury. Lena's exhausted mind registered that this was wrong, that she shouldn't be here, that she needed to leave. But her body had already made the decision. She kicked off her shoes, collapsed onto the bed. The mattress felt like floating on clouds made of money and impossible dreams, the silk sheets cool against her flushed skin. Her eyes closed before she could reconsider. Just 5 minutes, she promised herself. 5 minutes, and then she'd find her way out, find her way home, find her way back to reality. The city lights painted patterns on the ceiling. Sirens wailed somewhere far below. And Lena Parker, invisible catering assistant, fell asleep in the bed of the most dangerous man in the city. She woke to silence. Not the comfortable silence of her tiny studio apartment, where traffic noise and neighbor arguments filtered through paper-thin walls. This was the silence of money, of soundproofing, of power that didn't need to announce itself. Lena's eyes opened slowly. Dawnlight filtered through those massive windows, painting the skyline in shades of pink and gold. For one beautiful, disorienting moment, she had no idea where she was. Then memory crashed back. The gala, the wine, the wrong hallway, the open door. Oh God. Lena sat up too fast. The room spun viciously. Her mouth tasted like old champagne and regret. She was still wearing her catering uniform, now wrinkled beyond redemption. Her hair had escaped its bun entirely, falling around her shoulders in tangled waves. She was in someone's hotel suite, someone's extremely expensive hotel suite, and any moment now that someone would, "You're awake." The voice came from across the room, low, controlled, carrying the kind of quiet authority that made Lena's survival instincts scream. She turned toward the sound and felt her heart stop. He stood by the windows, backlit by the rising sun, wearing black slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Dark hair, perfectly styled. Strong jaw, clean-shaven. Eyes that caught the morning light and reflected nothing back. Victor Romano. Lena didn't know his name yet, but she knew what he was. You didn't grow up in this city without learning to recognize predators. He held a cup of coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals, and studied her with the same detached interest someone might give a stray dog that had wandered into their garage. Lena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "You thought this was an employee rest area." His voice carried no inflection. Statement, not question. "Yes, I was. I worked the gala last night. I got turned around and I saw the door open and She was babbling. Stop babbling. "I'm leaving, right now. I'm so sorry." She swung her legs off the bed, searching frantically for her shoes. Where were her shoes? Had she even worn shoes up here? "What's your name?" Lena froze. "What?" "Your name." He took a sip of coffee, still watching her with those unnervingly calm eyes. "I'd like to know it." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but something in his tone suggested that running might be the worst possible choice right now. "Lena," she whispered. "Lena Parker." "Lena Parker." He repeated it slowly, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "You work for Prestige Catering?" How did he know that? Then she remembered. Her uniform. The company logo probably embroidered somewhere, evidence of exactly how far out of her depth she was. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. He moved from the window, crossing to a side table where an expensive-looking coffee maker sat, surrounded by hotel amenities that probably cost more than her weekly salary. Coffee? Was this a test? A trap? Lena's hungover brain couldn't process what was happening. No, thank you. I should really go. I'm sure you want to... how much do they pay you? The question landed like a slap. Excuse me? Prestige Catering. How much do they pay you per hour? Lena's face burned. That's really not... $12? He poured himself more coffee, still not looking at her. 13? No benefits, I'd imagine. No paid time off. You work 70, 80 hours a week across multiple companies, trying to stitch together something resembling a living wage. He turned now, and for the first time she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Not sympathy. Something sharper. More dangerous. Am I wrong? How do you... Lena stood, forgetting about her shoes, forgetting about everything except the growing certainty that this man was far more dangerous than his expensive suit suggested. Who are you? A slight smile touched his lips. I own this hotel. The floor dropped out from under her. Of course he did. She'd passed out drunk in the private suite of the man who owned the Grand Carlisle. Could this get any worse? I am so fired, she whispered. No. Victor set down his coffee cup with careful precision. You're not fired, but you are going to answer some questions for me. What questions? I told you I just got lost. I thought the door was... Who told you to come up here? Lena blinked. What? No one. I told you. What did they offer you? He moved closer, and Lena instinctively stepped back until her legs hit the bed. Money? A way out of debt? What was the price to get you into my suite? I don't understand what you're asking me. Then let me be clear. He was close now. Too close. She could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Last night, during the gala, a very specific sequence of events was supposed to occur. Events involving this suite. Events that didn't happen because you were unconscious in my bed instead of where you were supposed to be. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. No. He studied her face with unnerving intensity. I don't think you do. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and held it up for her to see. Security footage, time-stamped from last night. It showed Lena stumbling down the hallway, clearly drunk, pushing open the door to his suite. This is you, he said, alone, intoxicated, looking for a place to rest. He swiped to another video. Different angle. Same hallway, different timestamp, approximately 10 minutes before Lena had appeared. This footage showed a dark-haired woman in a red gown deliberately propping open the door to his suite, wedging it with a small piece of cardboard before disappearing back down the hallway. This, Victor continued, is someone setting a trap, a very specific trap designed to compromise me, and you, Lena Parker, stumbled into it completely by accident. The room spun again, but this time it had nothing to do with alcohol. I don't know that woman. I know. He pocketed the phone. Which creates an interesting problem. What problem? The people who planned this, who paid that woman to leave my door accessible, who likely had cameras positioned to document whatever was supposed to happen here. Those people have already moved forward with their plan. By now, photographs exist, videos probably, evidence of someone in my suite who shouldn't be. Lena felt sick. But nothing happened. I just slept. We didn't... Do you think that matters? His voice remained calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. In my world, perception is reality. If my enemies believe they have leverage, they have leverage. If they think I've been compromised, I've been compromised. Then show them the security footage. Show them I was just a drunk idiot who got lost. I intend to. He moved to the window, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the brightening sky. But that creates a different problem. What problem? You. The single word hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Once I reveal what really happened, Victor continued, still facing the window, the people behind this will know they failed. They'll know their trap caught the wrong person, and they'll need to eliminate the evidence of their failure. Understanding hit like ice water. You mean they'll kill you? He turned back to face her, expression unreadable. Yes, almost certainly. You're a loose end. Loose ends don't survive long in my world. Lena's legs gave out. She sat hard on the bed, mind racing through impossible options. Run, hide, go to the police. Each option more futile than the last. Why are you telling me this? Her voice came out small, broken. Because I'm offering you a choice. Victor crossed back to her, crouching so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the absolute absence of mercy in his expression. You can leave, he said quietly. Walk out that door. Take your chances with whoever's hunting you. Hope that you're faster, smarter, luckier than they are. Or you stay under my protection. Let me clean up this mess. Keep you alive until the danger passes. Lena laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Protection? Is that what you're calling it? What would you call it? A cage. She met his eyes, fear transforming into something harder, angrier. You're offering me a cage. Yes? He didn't flinch from the word, didn't pretend. A very comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. And if I choose to walk out that door, then you walk out. He stood, moving back to give her space. I won't stop you, but I won't be able to protect you either. Some choice. It's more than most people in your situation get. Lena stood on shaking legs and walked to the window. 15 stories below, the city was waking up. Coffee shops opening, buses running their routes, normal people living normal lives. Her studio apartment was 17 blocks north, a tiny box filled with secondhand furniture and unpaid bills and the illusion of freedom. She could see it from here, could almost pretend she could still go back. How long? She asked without turning around. How long what? This protection, this arrangement. How long until the danger passes? Silence stretched between them. When Victor finally answered, his voice carried something that might have been regret, or might have been nothing at all. I don't know. Lena closed her eyes. Thought about running, about fighting, about all the choices she didn't actually have. When she opened her eyes again, her reflection in the window looked like a stranger. A girl who'd made one wrong turn and fallen through the looking glass into a world she didn't understand. What happens now? She asked. Now. Victor's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Now you pack what little you own. Now you disappear from your old life. Now you learn to live in mine. And if I hate it, you will. The honesty of it struck her silent. But you'll be alive, he continued. And in my experience, living angry is better than dying free. Lena turned to face him. This stranger who held her life in his hands. This man whose name she still didn't know, but whose presence filled the room like smoke. I don't even know who you are. Yes, you do. His slight smile held no warmth. You knew the moment you woke up and saw me. Some part of you recognized exactly what I am. He was right. She had known. On some primal level, she'd understood immediately that this wasn't just a wealthy hotel owner. This was something else, something darker. Victor Romano, he said, offering his hand like they were meeting at a business lunch instead of negotiating her captivity. Welcome to the rest of your life, Lena Parker. She stared at his outstretched hand, at the choice that wasn't really a choice, at the door she couldn't walk through and the cage she couldn't refuse. Then she reached out and shook it. His grip was warm, firm, absolutely unyielding. And Lena Parker, invisible catering assistant, died quietly in that handshake. Whatever came next would be someone else entirely. I'll need to call my roommate, she heard herself say. Tell her I'm okay. No. No? No contact with your old life. Not until this is resolved. Victor released her hand and walked to the door. Someone will collect you in an hour. Bring nothing from your apartment that can be traced. No phone, no computer, no sentimental items. You're serious. I'm always serious. He opened the door, then paused, looking back at her one last time. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry this happened to you. Are you sorry enough to let me go? No. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Lena stood alone in the vast suite, watching the sun climb higher over the city she'd never see the same way again. Somewhere below, in a studio apartment she'd never returned to, her phone was probably ringing. Her roommate probably worried. Her life probably continuing without her. She thought about crying, about screaming, about breaking something expensive just to feel like she had any power left. Instead, she walked to the bathroom, all marble and gold fixtures, and looked at herself in the mirror. The girl looking back had dark circles under her eyes, ruined makeup, tangled hair, a catering uniform that marked her as invisible, forgettable, nobody. By the time someone came to collect her, Lena thought, that girl needed to be gone. Because whatever came next would require someone stronger, someone harder, someone who understood that wrong doors didn't just change your direction, they changed everything. She turned on the shower, letting it run hot enough to steam the mirror, and began washing away the last traces of the life she'd lost. Outside the bathroom, the city hummed with morning traffic and breaking news and the small tragedies of ordinary people. Inside, Lena Parker stood under water hot enough to burn and learned her first lesson in Victor Romano's world. Survival meant becoming someone else entirely. And she had exactly 1 hour to figure out who that someone would be. The black sedan that collected Lena had windows tinted so dark she couldn't see the city passing by. The driver never spoke, never looked at her, just opened the door, waited for her to climb inside, and drove in absolute silence through streets she could only imagine. She'd left her apartment with nothing. No phone, as instructed, no laptop, no photographs of her mother who'd died 3 years ago, no journals filled with dreams of escaping the city, just the clothes on her back, jeans and a sweater she'd grabbed in the confused panic of packing while her roommate Sarah banged on the locked bedroom door, demanding to know what was happening. Lena hadn't answered, couldn't answer. What would she have said? That she'd drunkenly stumbled into a stranger's hotel suite and now belonged to him? That invisible catering assistants didn't get second chances, only different prisons? Instead, she'd climbed out the fire escape like a thief fleeing her own life. The car turned sharply, climbing a hill Lena recognized from the tilt of her body. They were heading toward the heights, the neighborhood where mansions perched like fortresses above the ordinary world. She'd catered parties up here before, moving through marble foyers with trays of champagne, invisible among people whose weekly grocery budget exceeded her monthly rent. When the sedan finally stopped, Lena expected gates, guards, the theatrical security of new money trying to look important. What she got was worse. The car pulled into an underground garage so vast it could have swallowed her entire apartment building. Luxury vehicles lined the walls like sleeping predators, Bentleys, Maseratis, a midnight blue Aston Martin that probably cost more than most houses. Overhead lights buzzed with the particular hum of spaces that never saw daylight. The driver opened her door, still silent, still refusing to meet her eyes. Lena climbed out on legs that had forgotten how to be steady. The garage smelled like expensive leather and motor oil, and the particular emptiness of spaces designed to hide things. This way. The voice came from behind her. Lena turned and found a woman waiting by an elevator, late 50s, steel-gray hair pulled into a perfect chignon, wearing a black pantsuit that suggested military precision disguised as professional attire. "I'm Mrs. Chen," the woman continued, her accent carrying hints of somewhere else. "Hong Kong, maybe, or Singapore. I manage Mr. Romano's household. You'll deal primarily with me. I don't understand what I'm—" "The elevator, please." Mrs. Chen's tone allowed no argument. "We have much to discuss, and Mr. Romano dislikes waiting." The elevator rose silently through what must have been multiple floors. Lena watched the numbers climb, B2, B1, G1, 2, 3, wondering how big this house actually was. Her studio apartment could have fit in this elevator. They emerged into a hallway that redefined Lena's understanding of wealth. Hardwood floors that gleamed like dark honey, original artwork that belonged in museums, windows overlooking gardens so perfectly manicured they looked artificial. "Your quarters are on the 3rd floor," Mrs. Chen said, walking with the brisk efficiency of someone whose time was valuable. "East wing. Private bathroom, sitting area, closet space. Meals will be brought to you 3 times daily unless Mr. Romano requests your presence at dinner." "Requests?" Lena struggled to keep pace. "Or requires." Mrs. Chen's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You're smarter than you look. They turned down another corridor, this one lined with closed doors that could have hidden anything. At the end, Mrs. Chen produced a key card and opened the last door on the left. Your room. Lena stepped inside and felt her breath catch. It wasn't a room, it was a suite, larger than her entire apartment had been. A four-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in ivory linens that looked like they'd never been touched. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city sprawling below. A sitting area with furniture that probably had Italian names. A bathroom visible through an open door that featured a tub big enough to drown in. This is, Lena turned in a slow circle. This is a cage. A very expensive cage, Mrs. Chen corrected. The windows don't open. The door locks from the outside. There are cameras. She pointed to small, nearly invisible lenses in the corners, monitoring everything except the bathroom. You have privacy only where absolutely necessary. Lena's stomach turned. What does he want from me? Right now? Nothing. Your collateral, insurance, a piece on the board that his enemies can't claim. Mrs. Chen moved to the closet and opened it, revealing clothes in Lena's size. Expensive clothes, designer labels she recognized from the wealthy women she'd served. You'll dress appropriately, behave appropriately, and you'll wait until Mr. Romano decides what to do with you. And if I refuse, then you leave. Mrs. Chen met her eyes directly. The elevator returns to the garage. The car takes you anywhere you want to go. And approximately 6 hours later, someone finds your body in an alley. The casual brutality of it struck Lena silent. Mr. Romano is not a good man, Mrs. Chen continued, straightening an already perfect sleeve. But he is a man of his word. If he says you're under his protection, you're protected. If he says you're free to leave, you're free. But freedom and survival are not the same thing, Miss Parker. She moved toward the door, then paused. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Romano expects you in the dining room. Wear the blue dress, third from the left. Questions? Lena had 1,000 questions, 1,000,000, but only one that mattered. What happens after dinner? Mrs. Chen's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That depends entirely on you. The door closed with a soft click. A lock engaged, and Lena stood alone in luxury that felt like drowning. She walked to the window, pressing her palm against the glass. Below, the city continued without her. Cars on distant streets, lights beginning to glow as afternoon faded toward evening. Somewhere down there, Sarah was probably calling hospitals, filing a missing persons report, crying over a roommate who'd vanished like smoke. Lena's reflection stared back from the window, same dark eyes, same unremarkable features, but somehow different. Changed. Like the girl who'd served champagne to wealthy strangers had been replaced by someone hollowed out and waiting to be filled with whatever Victor Romano decided she should become. The blue dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Someone had taken her measurements, studied her size, prepared for her arrival like she was expected inventory rather than a human being who'd stumbled into the wrong life. Lena stood in front of the full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress was Valentino. She'd learned the label from years of watching wealthy women glide past in clothes that cost more than her rent. Midnight blue silk that moved like water, cut to make her look elegant rather than invisible. Her hair, still damp from the shower, fell in dark waves around her shoulders. She'd found makeup in the bathroom, expensive, unopened, exactly her shades, and applied it with shaking hands. She looked like she belonged in this house, this cage, this life. She looked like a lie. At precisely 7 o'clock, the door unlocked. Mrs. Chen appeared, gave Lena a single appraising nod, and gestured for her to follow. The dining room existed in a different reality altogether. A table long enough to seat 20 stretched beneath a chandelier that threw fractured light across walls painted in deep charcoal. Original artwork, a Rothko, unless Lena was mistaken, dominated one wall. Windows overlooked the gardens, now lit by subtle landscape lighting that made the perfectly trimmed hedges look like sculptured shadows. Victor sat at the head of the table, reading something on a tablet, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than a car. He didn't look up when Lena entered. Didn't acknowledge her presence at all until Mrs. Chen cleared her throat softly. Miss Parker is here, sir. I can see that. Victor set down the tablet and finally met Lena's eyes. His expression revealed nothing. Sit. Not a request, a command. Lena sat in the chair Mrs. Chen pulled out, far enough from Victor to feel the distance, close enough to know she couldn't escape his attention. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light. China plates with gold edging sat waiting for food Lena couldn't imagine eating. Mrs. Chen disappeared silently. Moments later, staff appeared. Two young men in formal attire who moved with the practiced invisibility Lena recognized from her own catering work. They served the first course without speaking, without making eye contact, ghosts performing a ritual for people who'd stopped seeing them. Lena stared at the soup in front of her. Something French, something expensive, something that smelled delicious and tasted like ash in her mouth. "You're not eating." Victor's voice cut through the silence. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Lena's hand tightened on her spoon. "Why?" "Because I said so." "That's not a reason?" "In this house, it's the only reason that matters." She looked up and found him watching her with that same unnerving intensity from the hotel, like she was a puzzle to solve, a problem to manage, anything except human. "Is that how this works?" Lena heard herself ask. "You say jump, and I ask how high." "Yes. And if I refuse? Then you'll learn what happens when people refuse me." The threat hung between them like something physical, but beneath the threat, Lena caught something else. A test. He was testing her, pushing to see how she'd react, whether she'd break immediately or if she had spine enough to be interesting. She picked up her spoon, tasted the soup, met his eyes while she swallowed. "It's cold," she said flatly. Victor's lips twitched. "Is it?" "Yes. Vichyssoise is meant to be served cold, but this particular recipe has been sitting too long. The cream is separating, temperature's risen above optimal. It's mediocre at best." Silence filled the dining room. The serving staff froze. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its breath. Then Victor smiled, a real smile, sharp as broken glass. "You know food. I've worked enough catering to know when the kitchen's phoning it in." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "What else do you know?" "I know this Rothko is worth approximately $8 million at auction. I know those are Baccarat glasses. The Harcourt pattern. Discontinued. Probably worth $2,000 each. I know this house has at least 30 rooms based on the elevator configuration and hallway structure. And I know you're testing me to see if I'm smart enough to be useful or stupid enough to be dismissed." Victor's smile widened. "And which are you?" "I'm smart enough to know I'm trapped and stupid enough to think talking back to you might make it feel like choice instead of captivity." He laughed, a short, genuine sound that transformed his face into something almost human. "Mrs. Chen was right. You are smarter than you look." "She told you that?" "She tells me everything." Victor dismissed the serving staff with a gesture. They vanished like smoke. "Which brings us to the purpose of this dinner." "I thought the purpose was watching me perform like a trained dog." "No. The purpose is explaining what happens next." He stood, walking to the window with his wine glass. His reflection merged with the darkness outside. "You know what I am. A criminal. I prefer entrepreneur. But yes, I run the city's underground, gambling, protection, certain imports and exports the government frowns upon. I have politicians in my pocket, police on my payroll, and enough legitimate businesses to make the whole operation look respectable." "And enemies," Lena added. "You have enemies who tried to trap you." "Everyone with power has enemies. It's how you know the power is real." He turned back to face her. "The people who set that trap last night are called the Volkov Syndicate. Russian Bratva, based in Brighton Beach, expanding west into my territory. They wanted leverage, proof I could be compromised, something to use against me in negotiations. But they got me instead. They got photographs of someone in my suite, videos probably, evidence they think they can use. By now, they've already made contact, suggested a meeting, offered to discuss mutual interests." Lena's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. I'm still deciding how to play this." Victor moved back to the table, standing too close to her chair, looking down at her with eyes that calculated possibilities like a chess master. "Which is where you become relevant." "How?" "Because I have options. I can show them the security footage, prove you were a random drunk who stumbled into the wrong room, destroy their leverage. But then they'll know I saw everything, know I can identify the woman who propped the door open." "Exactly. which makes you a liability they'll eliminate immediately. He circled behind her chair, and Lena forced herself not to flinch. Or I can let them believe their trap worked, let them think I've been compromised, use their assumptions against them. How does that help me? It doesn't, but it helps me. And in case you've forgotten, your survival currently depends on what helps me. Lena twisted in her chair to face him. So I'm bait. Again. Just a different trap with the same ending. Not quite. Victor crouched beside her chair, bringing them eye to eye. If I use you as bait, I control the trap, control the environment, control who lives and who dies when it closes. And you expect me to trust that you'll choose my survival over your interests? No. I expect you to understand that right now our interests align. They want leverage against me. I want them dead. You want to stay alive. The only scenario where everyone gets what they want is if you do exactly what I tell you. His proximity made it hard to breathe, hard to think. Lena could smell his cologne again, that dark, expensive scent that probably had an Italian name she couldn't pronounce. What do you want me to do? For now, stay here. Let yourself be seen by my staff. Let word spread that Victor Romano has a woman living in his house. Someone young, someone unexpected, someone who appeared right after the gala. You want people to think we're together. Yes. He stood, moving back to his seat with casual grace. Let the rumors build. Let the Volkovs think their trap worked exactly as planned. And when they make their move, we'll be ready. When they make their move, people will die. People die every day in this city, Lena. At least this way, you won't be one of them. The servers returned with the main course, something that smelled incredible and looked like art on a plate. Victor ate with the calm of someone discussing weather rather than murder. Lena pushed food around, her appetite gone, her mind racing through scenarios that all ended in violence. You have questions. Victor said it like fact. Hundreds. Ask one. Lena set down her fork. Why not just kill them first? You obviously know who they are, where to find them. Why this elaborate game? Because killing them starts a war. A war costs money, destabilizes territory, draws unwanted attention from authorities I've spent years cultivating. But if they move against me first, if they break the rules of engagement we've all agreed to, then I'm justified in responding with overwhelming force. The other families will accept it, expect it even. So this is about politics. Everything is about politics when you have this much power. He took a sip of wine. But yes, I need the Volkovs to strike first. To overreach, to give me justification for ending them so completely that no one else considers testing me. And I'm the bait that makes them overreach. You're the vulnerability that makes them arrogant. There's a difference. Lena laughed, bitter and sharp. Not from where I'm sitting. Victor studied her across the table. The chandelier light caught in his dark eyes, making them look almost warm, almost human. But Lena had learned enough in one day to know that warmth from predators was just another kind of danger. You could have broken by now, he said quietly. Most would have, crying, begging, offering anything to make this stop. Would it help? No. Then why waste the effort? He smiled again, that sharp, dangerous smile. I'm beginning to think I underestimated you, Lena Parker. Don't worry, I've spent my entire life being underestimated. You're in good company. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. Staff cleared plates, brought dessert neither of them touched, refilled wine glasses with precision. Lena felt the weight of their carefully blank expressions, people who'd learned to be invisible in the presence of power. People just like she'd been yesterday. When Mrs. Chen finally appeared to dismiss her, Lena stood with as much dignity as she could salvage. One more thing, Victor said before she could leave. Lena paused at the doorway. Yes? Tomorrow you'll meet my head of security. He'll teach you how to survive if things go wrong. I thought you said I was protected. You are. But protection isn't the same as safety. He returned his attention to his tablet, dismissing her without another glance. And in my world, the difference can get you killed. Back in her beautiful cage, Lena stood at the window and watched the city lights blur into stars. She thought about Sarah, probably frantic with worry, about the catering companies she'd worked for, already replacing her without a second thought, about the life she'd lost because she'd walked through the wrong door. Below, in the gardens, she noticed movement, security guards patrolling with the practiced efficiency of soldiers, Cameras on every corner, lights that activated with motion. This house wasn't just a mansion, it was a fortress. And somewhere in its expensive heart, Victor Romano sat planning war while she played the role of his most valuable weapon. The lock on her door engaged at midnight. Lena heard it click into place, sealing her inside luxury that felt like suffocation. She crawled into the four-poster bed, buried herself in silk sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and tried not to think about how comfortable captivity felt when it came with thread count this high. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor's face, heard his voice, felt the weight of his attention like something physical pressing against her skin. "You're smarter than you look." The words played on repeat in her exhausted mind. Was that a compliment, a warning, or just another form of manipulation from a man who probably saw everything as leverage? Lena rolled onto her side, staring at the empty sitting area where shadows collected in expensive corners. In the morning, she'd meet his head of security. Learn to survive. Learn whatever skills came with being bait in a trap designed to start a war. But tonight, alone in her cage, she let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Fear, anger, the bone-deep exhaustion of being stripped of every choice until only survival remained. She didn't cry. Tears seemed pointless when nobody was there to witness them. Instead, she lay in the darkness and felt herself changing, felt the soft parts of her personality hardening into something sharper, something capable of surviving Victor Romano's world. By the time dawn painted the windows pink and gold, Lena Parker had made a decision. If she was going to be trapped in this life, if she was going to be used as bait and leverage and whatever else Victor needed, then she would learn. She would adapt. She would become someone who couldn't be dismissed or discarded the moment her usefulness expired. She would survive. And if survival meant becoming someone else entirely, then she'd buried that scared catering assistant the moment she shook Victor Romano's hand. What rose in her place would be harder, smarter, dangerous enough to navigate this world without drowning. The lock disengaged at 7. Mrs. Chen appeared with breakfast on a silver tray, coffee, fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like Paris. "Mr. Romano expects you in the gym at 8, the older woman said, setting the tray on the sitting area table. "Wear the athletic clothes in your closet. Dmitri doesn't tolerate lateness." "Dmitri?" "Head of security, former Spetsnaz. He'll assess whether you're capable of basic self-defense or whether we're wasting our time." Lena bit into a croissant that tasted like butter and regret. "And if I'm wasting your time?" Mrs. Chen's expression remained neutral. "Then we hope Mr. Romano's plan works perfectly, because if it doesn't, you'll have no way to protect yourself when everything goes wrong." She left before Lena could respond. The door locked behind her. And Lena sat alone with breakfast that tasted like ashes, and the growing certainty that wrong doors didn't just change your direction, they changed who you had to become to survive what came next. The gym occupied the entire basement level, a space that looked like it belonged in a professional training facility rather than a private residence. Punching bags hung like bodies from reinforced ceiling beams. Weight equipment gleamed under industrial lighting. Mats covered most of the floor in sections marked for different combat styles. The air smelled like sweat and leather, and the particular tension of spaces designed for controlled violence. Dmitri stood in the center, arms crossed, watching Lena descend the stairs with the cold assessment of someone evaluating livestock. He was massive, easily 6'4", built like a tank wrapped in human skin, with a shaved head and a scar that bisected his left eyebrow. His eyes were the palest blue Lena had ever seen, almost colorless, and they tracked her movement with predatory focus. "You're late," he said. His accent was thick, Russian, every word clipped short like ammunition. Lena checked the wall clock. "It's 2 minutes past 8. In my world, 2 minutes means you're dead." He gestured to the mats. "Center, now." She walked to where he indicated, hyper-aware of how the athletic clothes clung to her body. Someone had stocked her closet with expensive activewear, Lululemon, Nike, brands she'd never been able to afford. The leggings fit perfectly. The sports bra provided support without restriction. Even her shoes were broken in, like someone had worn them just enough to make them comfortable. The attention to detail should have been impressive. Instead, it felt invasive, like every aspect of her body had been studied, measured, cataloged for future use. "What combat training do you have?" Dmitri circled her slowly, evaluating from every angle. None. Self-defense classes? Martial arts? Anything? I took a kickboxing class once, for fitness. His expression suggested she'd just admitted to being utterly useless. How long? 2 months? 3 years ago? Perfect. You know just enough to get yourself killed. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Mr. Romano says I teach you to survive. This is problem. Why? Because survival takes years to learn. We have maybe weeks before Volkovs make move. I cannot make you fighter in weeks. Best I can do is teach you not to die immediately when violence starts. Lena's stomach twisted. That's encouraging. I don't encourage. I prepare. Dmitri moved to an equipment rack and returned with 2 training knives, rubber blades designed to bruise but not cut. He handed her one. You know what this is? A knife. Wrong. This is what kills you when you're stupid. Hold it. Lena gripped the rubber handle, and Dmitri immediately adjusted her hand position with rough efficiency. Fingers here. Thumb on spine. Blade pointed down, not up. You stab up, you get stuck in ribs. You stab down, you penetrate organs. He demonstrated with clinical precision. Again. They drilled for an hour. Dmitri attacked in patterns designed to overwhelm her. Quick strikes she couldn't possibly block, holds she couldn't escape. Scenarios where her only option was surviving long enough for help to arrive. He never hurt her badly, but he never went easy either. Each bruise was a lesson. Each moment of panic was training. You freeze, he said, after throwing her to the mat for the 6th time. This is natural. Prey freezes when predator strikes. But frozen means dead. You understand? Lena nodded, gasping for breath. Words. Use words. I understand. No, you don't. But you will. He pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. Again. By the time he finally called a break, Lena's entire body screamed with exhaustion. She collapsed on the mat, muscles shaking, lungs burning. Dmitri handed her a water bottle and sat beside her with the easy confidence of someone whose body was a weapon he'd spent decades perfecting. You're weak, he said conversationally. No muscle, no stamina, no instinct for violence. Thanks for the assessment. But you don't quit. This is good. Weakness can be fixed. Quitting cannot. He took a long drink of his own water. Mr. Romano, he tells me you stumbled into his suite by accident. This is truth? Yes. And now you're here because leaving means dying? That's the general idea. Dmitri nodded slowly. I have seen this before. People who become valuable by accident. Some break, some adapt. Some become more dangerous than those who chose this life. Which one am I? Too soon to tell, but you have spine. This matters more than strength. He stood, offering his hand to pull her up. Tomorrow, we work on awareness. How to read room, how to identify exits, how to know when violence is coming before it arrives. But today, we work on something more important. What's that? How to fall without breaking. He swept her legs before she could react. Lena hit the mat hard, the impact driving air from her lungs. Before she could recover, Dmitri grabbed her arm and pulled her up, only to immediately throw her down again from a different angle. Landing is everything, he explained, his voice clinical despite the violence of his actions. You will fall, in heels, in confined spaces, while running, while fighting. How you fall determines if you get up again. They drilled until Lena's body moved on instinct rather than thought. Tuck the chin, protect the head. Roll with momentum instead of resisting. Convert falling into movement. She hit the mat dozens of times, each impact teaching her body lessons her mind couldn't quite grasp. When Dmitri finally dismissed her, Lena could barely walk. Her muscles felt like water. Her skin bloomed with bruises that would be spectacular by tomorrow. But something had shifted. Some fundamental understanding that her body could be trained to survive what her mind said was impossible. Same time tomorrow, Dmitri called as she limped toward the stairs. And eat more. You need muscle, not just determination. Mrs. Chen met her at the top of the stairs with a towel and an expression that might have been sympathy. Ice bath is ready in your room, the older woman said. It will help with the soreness. I don't think anything will help with the soreness. The first week is worst. After that, your body adapts. Mrs. Chen handed her the towel. Mr. Romano wants to see you at 6. Dinner will be informal tonight, just the two of you in the study. Lena's heart rate, which had finally started to settle, spiked again. Why? He didn't say, but he seemed pleased with Dimitri's report. Dimitri already reported? Mr. Romano receives updates on everything that happens in this house. Mrs. Chen's expression remained neutral. Everything, Miss Parker. It's best you remember that. The ice bath was torture. Lena lowered herself into water so cold it felt like knives, gritting her teeth against the shock. But Mrs. Chen had been right. After the initial agony, the cold numbed everything. The bruises, the exhaustion, the creeping awareness that she was being watched, evaluated, molded into whatever Victor Romano needed her to become. She soaked until her skin turned pink and her fingers wrinkled, then dragged herself out and stood under a shower hot enough to steam. The temperature shock made her gasp, but it also made her feel alive. Present. Real in a way she hadn't felt since waking up in Victor's hotel suite. By 6 o'clock, dressed in clothes she hadn't chosen but fit perfectly anyway, Lena made her way to Victor's study. She'd learned the house's layout through observation, the main stairs, the service corridors, the rooms that stayed locked, and the ones that stood open like invitations. The study was on the second floor, facing the gardens, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows that overlooked the city like a king surveying his kingdom. Victor sat behind a massive desk, reading something on multiple monitors that displayed information Lena couldn't decipher from the doorway. He looked up when she knocked, and something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe? Or satisfaction. "Come in, see," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "Close the door." Lena did as instructed, hyper-aware of the intimacy of the closed door. The study felt different from the dining room, more personal, more dangerous. This was where Victor worked, where he planned, where he made decisions that shaped the city's underworld. "Dimitri says you have potential," Victor said without preamble. "That's high praise from him. He threw me on the ground for 2 hours. I'm not sure that qualifies as praise. He could have thrown you for 5 minutes and dismissed you as hopeless. The fact that he invested time means he thinks you're worth the effort." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unnerving focus. "You're sore. What gave it away? The way you're sitting, favoring your left side. Dimitri must have worked on ground defense." Among other things, Lena shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make her ribs scream. "Why am I really here? I doubt you called me to discuss my training progress." "No, I called you because the Volkovs made contact." He turned one of his monitors so she could see. An email, written in English but clearly translated from Russian. The message was brief, professional, terrifying in its politeness. "We understand you have acquired new assets. Perhaps we should discuss mutual interests over dinner. The arrangement could be beneficial for both parties." "They think you're sleeping with me," Lena said quietly. "They think I'm keeping you. There's a difference. Sleeping with you would be pleasure. Keeping you suggests investment, something they can leverage. And you're going to meet with them." "We're going to meet with them," Victor corrected. "Tomorrow night. Neutral territory. A restaurant I own where I control every variable except their response." Lena's hands tightened on the chair arms. "You're bringing me. I'm presenting you, letting them see what they think they've gained leverage over, watching how they play it. What if they try to take me? Use me against you right there? Then Dimitri and 6 other men kill everyone in the restaurant except you and me." Victor said it with the same tone someone might use to discuss weather. "But they won't. Not yet. This is reconnaissance. They want to confirm their intelligence, see how attached I am, evaluate whether you're worth using. And how attached should you appear? Interested enough to be vulnerable, not so attached that losing you would destroy me." His eyes traveled over her face, cataloging details with clinical precision. "You'll need to play your part convincingly." "What part is that?" "The woman who chose to be here, who wants to be here. Not a captive, but a willing participant in my life." Lena laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want me to pretend I'm with you by choice. I want you to convince them you are. There's a difference between pretending and convincing." "Not from where I'm sitting." Victor stood and moved around the desk, perching on its edge directly in front of her. The position put them close enough that Lena could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're angry. he observed. Of course I'm angry. You've turned my life into a performance where the audience wants to kill me. Good. Use the anger. Channel it into something they'll mistake for passion. He reached out and caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. The touch was firm but not harsh, possessive without being painful. When they see us together, they need to believe you're mine, that you chose this, that losing you would cost me something real. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. And if I can't convince them, then they'll know you're just bait, and bait has no value once the trap is obvious. His thumb brushed across her jawline, a gesture that could have been tender if his eyes weren't so cold. You're smarter than that, Lena. You know how to read people, how to give them what they expect while hiding what you really feel. You've done it your entire life, serving people who never saw you as human. He was right. She hated that he was right. What exactly do you need me to do? Victor released her chin but didn't move away. Tomorrow night, you'll dress beautifully. You'll sit beside me at dinner. You'll laugh at the right moments, touch my hand, look at me like I'm the only person in the room. You'll make them believe that Victor Romano has found something he values more than power. And then? And then we wait for them to make their mistake. He returned to his chair, the moment of intimacy, or whatever it had been, evaporating like it had never existed. They'll push, test boundaries, try to isolate you or threaten you. And when they do, you'll remember everything Dmitri taught you about surviving until help arrives. You're using me as bait to make them overconfident. I'm using their assumptions against them. There's a difference. Not a very comforting one. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I don't need you comforted, Lena. I need you smart, alert, capable of playing the role without breaking when the pressure increases. Can you do that? Lena thought about her life before this. Years of serving wealthy people who looked through her like she was furniture. Bosses who snapped fingers in her face and expected gratitude for minimum wage. Landlords who raised rent while the ceiling leaked. She'd spent her entire adult life performing, pretending exhaustion was enthusiasm, fear was deference, rage was professional courtesy. At least this performance came with better costumes. I can do it, she said. You're certain? No, but I'll do it anyway. Victor smiled, that sharp, dangerous smile that transformed his face into something predatory. That's what I thought. Mrs. Chen will brief you on the details tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You'll need your strength. Lena stood to leave, her body protesting every movement. At the door, she paused and looked back. Victor? It was the first time she'd used his first name. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. Yes? When this is over, when the Volkovs make their mistake and you've ended them like you're planning, what happens to me? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Victor leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, studying her like she was the equation he couldn't quite solve. I don't know, he said finally. Ask me again when we're both still alive. Sleep came in fragments that night. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, her bruised body refusing to find comfort in the expensive mattress. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor's face, felt his thumb against her jawline, heard his voice explaining how she needed to perform love to survive. By dawn, she'd made peace with what came next. If Victor Romano needed her to play the role of willing captive, she'd give him a performance worth believing. She'd smile and touch and laugh and make his enemies think she'd chosen this cage. And while they were busy believing the lie, she'd be learning, watching, understanding the mechanisms of power that kept her trapped. Because someday, maybe not soon, maybe not until long after the Volkovs were dead and buried, she'd need that knowledge to escape, or to decide that escape wasn't what she wanted anymore. The thought terrified her more than anything else in this new life, that she might become someone who chose to stay in the cage even after the door unlocked. Mrs. Chen appeared at 8 with breakfast and an armful of garment bags. Mr. Romano had these brought in for tomorrow night, the older woman said, hanging them in the closet. He'd like you to choose the one you feel most comfortable in. Lena unzipped the first bag and felt her breath catch. Dior. The dress was midnight blue, nearly black in certain light, with a neckline that would reveal just enough to be interesting without being obvious. The second was Versace, crimson silk that would cling to every curve. The third was Valentino, emerald green with details that probably cost more than a car. These are... Lena touched the fabric with something close to reverence. These are museum pieces. They're tools, Mrs. Chen corrected. Choose the one that makes you feel powerful, not beautiful. You'll need that power tomorrow night. What if I can't pull this off? Then people die. Possibly including you. The older woman's expression remained neutral. But I don't think you'll fail. Why not? Because I've watched Mr. Romano collect broken things for 20 years. He fixes some, discards others. But you're not broken, Miss Parker. You're just angry. And angry survives better than broken ever could. After Mrs. Chen left, Lena tried on each dress, studying her reflection with critical eyes. The Dior made her look elegant. The Versace made her look dangerous. But the Valentino, the emerald green that caught the light like water, made her look like someone who'd chosen to be exactly where she was. She chose the Valentino. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Dmitri worked her through scenarios, how to exit a room quickly, how to identify threats in crowds, how to create distance without seeming to flee. A woman Lena had never met appeared to style her hair, test makeup options, ensure that tomorrow night's performance would be flawless. Mr. Romano wants natural, the stylist explained, working expensive products through Lena's hair. Like you didn't try too hard. Like being beautiful is effortless for you. Nothing about this is effortless. That's what makes it convincing. By evening, Lena felt like a show horse being prepped for auction. Every detail perfected, every angle considered, every possible flaw buffed away until what remained was a version of herself she barely recognized. Victor summoned her to his study after dinner. This time, when she entered, he wasn't behind his desk. He stood by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Whiskey," he said, offering her one. "You'll need to develop a taste for it. The Volkovs respect people who drink seriously." Lena took the glass and sipped. The burn was immediate, harsh, but underneath she tasted smoke and something almost sweet. She'd never been much of a drinker, couldn't afford to be, but she forced herself not to cough. "Better," Victor observed. "Tomorrow night, small sips. Enough to seem comfortable, not enough to lose control. You've thought of everything." "I tried to." He moved closer, close enough that the city lights painted shadows across his features. "There's one more thing we need to address." "What's that?" "Physical contact. They'll be watching how we interact, looking for signs that our relationship is real." Lena's pulse quickened. "What kind of signs?" Instead of answering, Victor set down his glass and reached for her hand. His fingers traced across her palm, up her wrist, leaving trails of heat on her skin. The touch was slow, deliberate, designed to look like unconscious intimacy. "Like this," he said quietly. Casual touches that suggest familiarity, comfort with each other's bodies. He stepped closer, his other hand settling on her waist. Not grabbing, not pulling, just resting there with the easy confidence of someone who'd touched her 1,000 times before. "They'll watch for hesitation," he continued, "for the moment you flinch or freeze. Any sign that you're not comfortable with my touch." "I'm not comfortable with your touch." "Then you need to become comfortable, quickly." His hand slid from her waist to the small of her back, drawing her incrementally closer. "This is a performance, Lena. The most important one you'll ever give. And the only way it works is if your body doesn't betray what your mind knows." Lena forced herself to breathe normally. To ignore the heat of his palm through the thin fabric of her shirt. To meet his eyes without flinching. "What do you need me to do?" "Trust me. Just for tomorrow night." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the clinical nature of the conversation. "Let me touch you, guide you. Make it look like this is exactly where you want to be." He was close enough now that she could feel his breath against her temple. Close enough that anyone watching would think they were lovers having a private moment. Close enough that Lena's body responded despite her mind's protests, heart racing, skin flushing, breath catching in her throat. "There," Victor murmured. "That's exactly right. That's what they need to see." He released her and stepped back, the moment ending as abruptly as it had begun. Lena stood frozen, her body still humming with adrenaline and something more complicated she refused to name. "Tomorrow night," Victor said, his voice returning to its usual controlled tone. "Remember this feeling, channel it, make them believe it's real." "What if I can't?" "You can. You're already halfway there." He picked up his whiskey glass. Get some rest. Tomorrow changes everything. Lena fled to her room before he could see how badly her hands were shaking. She collapsed on the bed, heart hammering, mind racing through what had just happened. He touched her, held her, made her body respond in ways she hadn't authorized. It was a performance, just a performance, practice for the real thing. But her racing pulse suggested her body hadn't gotten that memo. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city sprawled in all its glittering chaos, millions of people living normal lives, unaware that tomorrow night, in an expensive restaurant somewhere in that maze of light and shadow, a performance would begin that would determine whether Lena Parker lived or died. And she'd have to convince Victor Romano's enemies that she'd chosen to love the man who'd made her his captive. The irony would have been funny if the stakes weren't so impossibly high. The Valentino dress fit like it had been designed specifically for Lena's body, which, she realized with creeping unease, it probably had been. Someone had taken her measurements while she slept, or perhaps extrapolated them from the security footage that tracked her every movement. The emerald silk clung to her curves without revealing too much, the neckline suggesting intimacy without demanding it. When she moved, the fabric caught the light like water, transforming her into someone who belonged in Victor Romano's world. The woman staring back from the mirror looked nothing like the exhausted catering assistant who'd stumbled into the wrong hotel suite. This woman had presence, polish, the kind of understated elegance that cost more than most people earned in a year. Her dark hair fell in waves that the stylist had made look effortless, but had required 90 minutes to achieve. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, emphasizing her eyes, softening her features, making her appear simultaneously innocent and knowing. She looked like Victor Romano's lover, his choice, his weakness. The performance had already begun, and she hadn't even left her room. Mrs. Chen appeared at 7, gave Lena a single approving nod, and handed her a small clutch purse that probably cost more than Lena's old monthly rent. Lipstick, compact, nothing else, the older woman said. Mr. Romano doesn't want you carrying anything that could be used against you. What about a phone in case something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, a phone won't save you. Dimitri will. Mrs. Chen adjusted an invisible wrinkle in Lena's dress. He'll be close. Not visible, but close. Trust that he's there. And Victor? Mr. Romano will protect you. Whatever else he is, he doesn't break his word. She paused, something almost like concern flickering across her usually neutral expression. But you need to understand something, Miss Parker. Tonight, you're not just playing a role. You're declaring allegiance. Once the Volkovs see you with Mr. Romano, once they believe you've chosen his world, there's no going back to who you were before. I lost who I was before the moment I walked into his hotel suite. No, you still had the option of being forgotten. After tonight, you'll be remembered, and in this world, being remembered is its own kind of prison. The words settled over Lena like a shroud, but before she could respond, Mrs. Chen was already moving toward the door. The car leaves in 10 minutes. Don't be late. Alone again, Lena took one final look at her reflection. The stranger in emerald silk stared back, and for a moment, Lena couldn't tell where the performance ended and the truth began. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the only way to survive convincingly was to stop pretending and start believing. She picked up the clutch, squared her shoulders, and walked out of her beautiful cage to play the most dangerous role of her life. Victor waited in the foyer, and when he turned to look at her descending the stairs, something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprised. He'd probably seen photographs of her in the dress already, but something deeper. Appreciation, maybe. Or recognition that the woman walking toward him had committed to the performance completely. He wore a charcoal suit that probably had an Italian name Lena couldn't pronounce, tailored so precisely it looked like a second skin. His dark hair was perfect, his jaw clean-shaven, and when his eyes traveled over her, Lena felt the assessment like a physical touch. Perfect, he said quietly when she reached the bottom of the stairs. You look perfect. I look expensive, there's a difference. Not tonight. He offered his arm, the gesture old-fashioned and surprisingly gentle. Tonight, expensive and perfect are the same thing. Lena took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. The black sedan waited in the circular driveway, engine purring, driver invisible behind tinted windows. Victor guided her into the back seat with a hand on her lower back, That same possessive touch from his study now performed for an audience of security cameras and staff who would report every detail. The performance had definitely begun. They rode in silence through streets Lena recognized from her old life, past the diner where she'd worked breakfast shifts, past the bus stop where she'd waited in winter cold, past the corner market where she'd bought day-old bread because it was 50 cents cheaper. That life existed on the other side of tinted windows now, close enough to see but impossibly distant. Nervous? Victor asked, not looking at her. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let them see it. His hand found hers in the darkness between them, fingers interlacing with surprising familiarity. Remember, you chose this. You want to be here, with me. Whatever they say, whatever they imply, that's the truth you hold on to. And if they try to separate us, they will. At some point, someone will suggest you'd be more comfortable waiting in another room, or they'll ask you a question designed to get you alone with them. His grip tightened fractionally. When that happens, you decline politely. Stay close to me. Make it clear that leaving my side isn't something you're interested in. What if they insist? Then things get interesting very quickly. He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable in the passing streetlights. But Dmitri will be watching. The moment they overstep, the moment you're in actual danger, he moves. You won't see it coming, and neither will they. The restaurant materialized from the city like something from another era. Lombardi's, an Italian establishment that had occupied the same corner for 3 generations. Lena had heard of it, naturally. You didn't work catering in this city without knowing the restaurants where deals were made and empires negotiated over handmade pasta and wine older than most people. The entrance was deliberately understated. A simple awning, brass fixtures that had aged into elegance, a doorman who looked like he'd broken bones professionally before retiring into hospitality. He opened the car door before they'd fully stopped, and Victor stepped out first, then turned to offer Lena his hand. The moment her heels touched the pavement, Lena felt the weight of observation. Security cameras in every corner, doorways that might hide watchers, windows reflecting the street while concealing whatever happened behind them. This was Victor's territory, his restaurant, but it was also neutral ground, a place where enemies could meet without immediate bloodshed. Victor's hand settled on her lower back again, guiding her toward the entrance with the easy confidence of ownership. Inside, the restaurant was everything Lena had imagined. White tablecloths, candlelight, murals of Italian landscapes that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Most tables were occupied by well-dressed couples and small groups, their conversations creating a murmur of privacy. But one table in the back corner, positioned with perfect sight lines to every entrance, sat 3 men who radiated danger, like other people radiated cologne. The Volkovs. Lena recognized them instantly. Not their faces, but their nature. The same predatory stillness she'd learned to identify in Victor. The same careful observation that cataloged threats and opportunities with equal precision. They watched Victor and Lena approach, with the cold interest of sharks circling prey. The man in the center stood as they neared, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair that suggested distinguished age rather than weakness. His suit was expensive, but not ostentatious. His smile revealed teeth that were too perfect to be natural. "Romano?" he said, his accent thick but controlled. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." "Dmitri," Victor replied, and Lena felt a jolt of confusion before realizing this was a different Dmitri. Dmitri Volkov, the patriarch of the family trying to leverage her existence. "Allow me to introduce Lena Parker." Volkov's eyes settled on Lena with unsettling intensity. "Miss Parker, a pleasure. Please sit." Victor pulled out Lena's chair, a gentlemanly gesture that also positioned her between himself and the wall, protected on one side, trapped on the other. She sat with as much grace as the dress allowed, hyper-aware of Volkov's assessment. The other 2 men remained silent. Younger, harder-looking, probably sons or trusted lieutenants. One had a scar across his knuckles that suggested violence was a career rather than an occasional necessity. The other wore glasses that made him look academic, but his eyes held the same cold calculation as his companions. "Wine?" Volkov gestured to a bottle already open on the table. "Barbaresco, 2004. Excellent year." "Thank you." Victor poured for Lena first, then himself, the domestic intimacy of the gesture not lost on their audience. "How have you been, Dmitri?" Business treating you well? Business is always complicated when territories overlap. Volkov smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Which brings us to why we're here. I thought we were here for dinner. Victor's tone remained pleasant, but Lena felt the tension in his body beside her. Lombardi's makes the best ossobuco in the city. And yet we both know this isn't about food. Volkov leaned back in his chair, studying them both. You've been expanding into Brighton Beach, my territory, taking accounts that have belonged to my family for 2 decades. I've been accepting business from entrepreneurs who feel underserved by their current arrangements. If your clients are seeking alternatives, perhaps you should examine why they're unhappy. The scarred man's jaw tightened, but Volkov raised a hand in casual dismissal. We can discuss business later. First, I'm curious about your companion. His attention shifted fully to Lena. Miss Parker, forgive my directness, but I'm surprised to see Romano with a date. He's usually so solitary. This was it, the test. Lena felt Victor's hand find hers under the table, squeezing once, reassurance or warning, she couldn't tell which. Victor's private by nature, Lena said, keeping her voice steady, but even private men need someone to share dinner with occasionally. Occasionally? Volkov's smile widened. From what I understand, you've been staying at his estate. That seems more than occasional. Information travels quickly in your circles. Information is currency, and you, Miss Parker, have become very interesting currency recently. He poured himself more wine, the gesture deliberately casual. Tell me, how did you and Romano meet? It's such a romantic question, don't you think? Lena felt the trap in the question. Any hesitation, any inconsistency, and they'd know she was performing. She glanced at Victor, letting her expression soften in a way she'd practiced in the mirror, then looked back at Volkov. I was working a charity gala at the Grand Carlisle. Victor was there on business. We literally ran into each other. I wasn't watching where I was going, spilled champagne all over his jacket. The lie came easily, built on enough truth to be believable. Most men would have been furious. Victor just laughed and offered to buy me a drink after my shift. How charmingly ordinary. Volkov didn't sound convinced. And you decided to leave your life behind to move into his home based on one conversation? I decided that working 3 jobs to afford a studio apartment with broken heating wasn't much of a life to leave behind. Lena reached for her wine glass, proud that her hand remained steady. Victor offered me a choice. I made it. Choice. Volkov tasted the word like wine. Such an interesting concept. We all like to believe we have choices, don't we? But circumstances often decide for us. Victor's hand tightened on Lena's under the table. If you have a point, Dmitri, I suggest you make it. My point is simple. You have something that belongs in my territory, and I'd like to discuss terms for its return. The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop several degrees. Lena realized with creeping horror that something meant the business Victor had taken. Accounts, operations, revenue streams that the Volkovs considered theirs by right. Nothing I have belongs to you, Victor said quietly. Everything I've acquired came to me voluntarily. If your former clients prefer my services, that's a market decision, not theft. Market decision. Volkov chuckled without humor. You always were good with words, Romano. But words don't change facts. You're operating in my territory without permission. That has consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You're a smart man. Surely you understand that every action creates reaction. Volkov's eyes slid to Lena again. For instance, when a man acquires something valuable, it becomes a target. Not because the thing itself matters, but because losing it would hurt him. The threat couldn't have been clearer if he'd written it in blood. Lena felt her pulse spike, but she forced herself to meet Volkov's gaze without flinching. I'm not a thing, she said quietly, and I'm not a target. Of course not. Volkov's smile was indulgent, patronizing. You're simply a woman who made a choice. Though I wonder, would you have made the same choice knowing it might put you in danger? Every choice carries risk. I decided Victor was worth the risk. Touching. The scarred man spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. But risk and reality are different animals, Miss Parker. Enough! Victor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. We came here to discuss business, not to listen to thinly veiled threats against my personal life. If you have territorial concerns, address them with me directly. Leave Lena out of this. But she's already in it. Volkov spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. The moment you brought her into your world, she became part of the equation. Surely you understand that. I understand you're testing boundaries to see how much you can push before I push back. Victor stood, pulling Lena up with him. Consider this your answer. My personal life is off limits. My business operations are legitimate, and if you continue conflating the two, you'll discover exactly how unpleasant I can be when someone crosses lines I've clearly marked. Volkov remained seated, but the other two men stood, hands moving toward concealed weapons. For a moment, violence hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Then Volkov laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made everything worse. Sit, sit. No need for dramatics. We're civilized men having dinner. He gestured to the approaching waiter. The ossobuco, as Romano recommended, for all of us, and another bottle of the Barbaresco. Victor hesitated, and Lena could feel the calculation happening behind his controlled expression. Walking out now would show weakness. Staying meant enduring more tests. Either way, the Volkovs won something. He sat. Lena followed, her body rigid with tension. Dinner arrived in courses that Lena barely tasted. The food was probably extraordinary. Lombardi's reputation demanded nothing less, but every bite turned to ash in her mouth. Conversation continued around her, a careful dance of business talk and veiled threats, references to territories and accounts, and arrangements that meant nothing to her, but everything to the men at this table. She played her part, touched Victor's hand when appropriate, laughed softly at his occasional dry comments. Let her body language suggest comfort and intimacy, even as her mind screamed warnings about the danger sitting 3 feet away. Volkov watched it all with the attention of a scientist observing an experiment. The other two men maintained their silence, but their eyes never stopped tracking movement, cataloging details, preparing for violence that might come at any moment. Miss Parker, the man with glasses said suddenly, breaking his silence, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the lounge while we discuss business? These conversations can be quite tedious for those not directly involved. There it was, the test Victor had predicted. The attempt to separate her, isolate her, see how she'd react. I'm perfectly comfortable here, Lena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And I find business conversations fascinating. But surely, she said she's comfortable. Victor's tone allowed no argument. Drop it, Mikhail. Mikhail's jaw tightened, but he subsided. Volkov, however, looked pleased, like Lena's refusal had confirmed something he'd suspected. Loyalty, the older man mused. Such a rare quality these days. You've chosen well, Romano. Miss Parker clearly knows where she belongs. The possessive phrasing made Lena's skin crawl, but she forced a smile. I know what I want. That's not quite the same as knowing where I belong. No? Volkov leaned forward, genuinely interested now. Then tell me, Miss Parker, what do you want? It was a trap. Every answer revealed something. Every word was ammunition. Lena felt Victor's warning pressure on her hand under the table. Security, she said finally. I spent my whole life one crisis away from losing everything. Victor offered me a life where I don't have to be afraid anymore. And you believe he can provide that? In his world, where violence is currency and loyalty is bought and sold like commodities? I believe he's more capable of protecting what matters to him than anyone else I've ever met. Lena met Volkov's eyes directly. And I matter to him. That's all the security I need. Silence fell over the table. Volkov studied her with renewed intensity, and Lena realized she'd either convinced him completely or revealed herself as a fraud. The next few seconds would determine which. Then Volkov smiled, genuinely this time, with something approaching respect. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Miss Parker. I haven't decided which. He raised his wine glass. To choices, then, and to hoping yours doesn't get you killed. They toasted, drank. The moment passed, but Lena felt something shift in the atmosphere. A decision made, a line crossed, a point of no return reached and exceeded. The rest of dinner proceeded with careful civility. Business was discussed in oblique terms. Territories were mentioned without direct threats. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu that Lena couldn't touch, an unspoken understanding seemed to have formed. The Volkovs would push. Victor would push back. and Lena existed in the space between as leverage both sides wanted to claim. When they finally stood to leave, Volkov extended his hand to Lena with old-world courtesy. "A pleasure meeting you, Miss Parker. I suspect we'll see each other again." "I hope not," Lena said honestly, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, calculated to be just uncomfortable enough to remind her of his strength. "Oh, we will. You've become far too interesting to ignore." He released her hand and turned to Victor. "We'll be in touch about the territories. I trust you'll give our discussion appropriate consideration." "I'll consider everything I always consider," Victor replied, his tone giving nothing away. In the car ride back, Lena finally allowed herself to shake. The adrenaline that had kept her steady through dinner evaporated, leaving her hollow and trembling. Victor said nothing, just pulled her against his side with surprising gentleness, letting her hide her reaction in the privacy of tinted windows. "You did well," he said quietly. "I was terrified." "I know, but they believed you. That's what matters." "What happens now?" "Now we wait. They'll analyze every word, every gesture, trying to determine if you're real or performance. And based on their conclusion, they'll either back off or escalate. Which do you think they'll do?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Escalate. Men like Volkov don't back down when they think they've found weakness. They push until something breaks. And if I'm what breaks, you won't be." His arms tightened around her. "I won't let you be." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, Lena realized Victor Romano actually meant it. She wasn't just bait anymore. Wasn't just leverage or performance or strategic asset. Somewhere between the hotel suite and tonight's dinner, she'd become something he actually intended to protect. And that, Lena understood with crushing clarity, was the most dangerous development of all. They arrived back at the estate after midnight. Dmitri, their Dmitri, not the silver-haired patriarch trying to destroy them, met them in the garage, his expression grim. "Volkov's people followed the car," he said without preamble. "They know the route, the security protocols, the shift changes. They're planning something." "How soon?" Victor's voice remained calm, but Lena felt the tension coiling through his body. "Days, maybe hours. They're moving up their timeline." Dimitri's pale eyes flicked to Lena. "She needs to be ready." "She will be." Victor guided Lena toward the elevator, his hand never leaving her back. "Double the perimeter guard. I want eyes on every approach, and get the safe room prepared." "Already done." The elevator rose in silence. When they reached Lena's floor, Victor followed her out, walking her to her door like they were normal people returning from a normal date. "Safe room?" Lena asked when they stopped outside her suite. "Reinforced panic room in the basement. Separate air supply, communication systems, enough provisions for a week. If things go wrong, when things go wrong, that's where you'll go. And you?" "I'll be ending the people who made it necessary." He touched her face, the gesture gentle despite the violence promised in his words. "Get some rest. Tomorrow Dmitri trains you on the security protocols. You need to know every exit, every safe zone, every contingency." "Victor, yes?" "Tonight, when Volkov threatened me, you almost started a war right there in the restaurant. Why?" He was quiet for so long that Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then his thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and when he spoke, his voice carried something that sounded almost like surprise. "Because somewhere between protecting an asset and performing for an audience, this stopped being entirely strategic." His dark eyes searched hers. "I don't know when it happened, but it did." He turned and walked away before Lena could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with her heart hammering and her carefully constructed understanding of their arrangement crumbling into something far more complicated. Inside her suite, Lena collapsed on the bed in her expensive dress and felt everything she'd been holding back crash over her. Fear. Exhaustion. The crushing weight of knowing that violence was coming and she stood directly in its path. But underneath all that, something else stirred. Something she didn't want to name or examine too closely, because acknowledging it meant admitting that somewhere in this nightmare of captivity and performance, some part of her had started to care whether Victor Romano lived or died. And that was a complication that could get them both killed. The attack came at 3 a.m, 6 days after the dinner at Lombardi's. Lena woke to silence. The wrong kind of silence. The absence of sound that meant something had stopped that should have been continuing. The ambient hum of the estate's security systems. The distant footsteps of guards on patrol. The gentle whir of climate control that kept the house at perfect temperature. All of it, gone. She sat up in the darkness, heart already racing, some primal instinct screaming danger before her conscious mind could identify why. The emergency lights should have activated when the power failed. They hadn't, which meant this wasn't a failure. It was deliberate. The door to her suite burst open. Not Volkov's men. Dmitri moving with the controlled urgency of someone executing a plan they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Safe room, now! He grabbed her arm, pulling her out of bed. We have maybe 90 seconds. What's happening? Later, move. Lena ran barefoot through hallways she'd memorized during the past week's training. Dmitri had drilled her relentlessly. Every exit route, every contingency, every scenario where things went catastrophically wrong. She'd complained about the paranoia. Now, sprinting through darkness with gunfire erupting somewhere below, she understood it had been preparation for exactly this moment. They descended a service stairwell Lena had never noticed during her initial captivity, hidden behind what looked like a linen closet, the kind of architectural secret that houses like this were built with. Dmitri moved ahead of her, weapon drawn, checking corners with professional precision. More gunfire. Closer now. Shouting in Russian and English, commands barked with the clipped efficiency of military operations. How many? Lena gasped, struggling to keep pace. At least 15. Professional crew. They cut power, communications, everything. Dmitri yanked open a reinforced door at the bottom of the stairs. Inside. Lock it behind me. Don't open for anyone except Mr. Romano or me. Where is Victor? Dealing with the ones who made it past the perimeter. He shoved her through the doorway. Lock it now. The door slammed shut. Lena threw the deadbolts, 3 of them, each as thick as her wrist, and heard the hydraulic seals engage with a hiss that meant the room was now hermetically sealed. The safe room was exactly as Victor had described, small, windowless, lined with reinforced steel, stocked with provisions and communication equipment. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white that made the space feel like a tomb. Lena collapsed against the wall, fighting panic. Above her, the estate was under siege. Victor was fighting for his life, and she was locked in a box, helpless, useless, exactly what she'd always been, someone who survived by hiding while others handled violence. The communications panel on the wall crackled to life. Lena. Victor's voice strained but controlled. Can you hear me? She lunged for the microphone. I'm here. I'm in the safe room. Victor, what's happening? Volkov's brought an army. They're trying to fight through to you. Background noise, gunfire, breaking glass, someone screaming. Stay in the room. No matter what you hear, stay in the room. How many of our people are still standing? Enough. A pause, heavy breathing, then the distinct sound of a gunshot. Dimitri's clearing the east wing. I'm handling the main house. They didn't expect this much resistance. Victor, I know. We prepared for this. Trust the preparation. The connection cut out. Lena sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. The safe room's thick walls muffled most sound, but occasionally something penetrated. Explosions, sustained gunfire, impacts that shook the foundation. Time became elastic, meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. Hours might have been minutes. She thought about the girl who'd stumbled drunkenly into Victor Romano's hotel suite. That girl would have been sobbing by now, begging, broken by the reality of violence happening floors above her head. But that girl had died weeks ago. What sat in this reinforced tomb was someone different, someone who'd been forged in the crucible of captivity and performance, and the gradual, terrifying realization that her captor had become something more complicated than enemy. The communication panel crackled again, but this time, the voice that emerged wasn't Victor's. Miss Parker. Volkov's cultured accent, slightly breathless. I know you can hear me. I've accessed Romano's security system. Quite impressive, really, but not impenetrable. Lena's blood turned to ice. You're wondering if I can get to you, Volkov continued, sounding almost conversational despite the gunfire in his background. The answer is no. That safe room is quite secure. But here's what I'm wondering. How long can you stay in there while Romano bleeds out 3 floors above you? You're lying. Am I? Check the medical monitors, room 2847. Your lover's vital signs are being tracked rather carefully right now. Lena's hand shook as she activated the security monitors. Most showed static, cameras destroyed in the fighting, but one monitor displayed what looked like a medical readout. Heart rate elevated but steady. Blood pressure concerning. A counter ticking upward that she realized with horror was blood loss estimation. He took a bullet for one of his men, Volkov said. Quite heroic, also quite stupid. The wound isn't immediately fatal, but without medical attention. He let the implication hang. What do you want? A trade. You, for Romano's life. I'll call off my people. Let his doctor treat him. All you have to do is open that door and come upstairs. And then what? You kill us both? Maybe, maybe not. But at least he'd have a chance. Whereas right now, in about 20 minutes, he bleeds out while you hide in your expensive box. Lena stared at the monitor, watching numbers fluctuate. Was it real? Was Volkov actually accessing their systems, or was this elaborate manipulation designed to draw her out? You're wondering if I'm telling the truth, Volkov said, reading her silence accurately. Let me prove it. Check camera 47. I'll have my men move him into view. She switched cameras. Static cleared to show the library. Destroyed now, furniture overturned, books scattered like dead birds. And in the center, surrounded by 3 armed men, Victor Romano slumped against a wall, his white shirt dark with blood, his face pale but conscious. One of Volkov's men grabbed Victor's head, forcing him to look up at the camera. Lena, Victor's voice came through the speaker, weak but firm. Don't. Stay in the room. That's an order. One of the men hit him, a brutal strike that snapped his head sideways. Blood sprayed across the camera lens. 20 minutes, Volkov said pleasantly. The choice is yours, Miss Parker. Hide and let him die, or save him and see what happens next. Either way, this ends tonight. The connection cut. Lena stood frozen, every instinct warring. Victor had ordered her to stay. Dmitri had told her not to open the door for anyone. Every bit of training said hiding was survival. But the man bleeding out upstairs had stopped being just her captor weeks ago, had become something else. Protector, partner in performance, the person who'd looked at her like she was worth protecting even when protecting her made no strategic sense. She thought about choices. Real choices. Not the illusion of choice she'd been given since this nightmare began. Victor had offered her freedom once. The freedom to walk out his hotel suite door and take her chances with assassins. She'd chosen captivity because captivity meant survival. Now she had another choice. Stay hidden and survive while Victor died. Or open the door and face whatever came next. Her hands moved to the deadbolts before her mind had fully decided. The first bolt slid back with a mechanical thunk that sounded like a death sentence. The second followed. The third. The hydraulic seals released with a hiss that meant she'd just traded perfect safety for perfect uncertainty. Lena opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The estate had been transformed into a war zone. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and choking. Emergency lighting cast everything in red that made the blood on the walls look black. Bodies. She didn't look too closely at faces, sprawled in positions that spoke of violence and sudden death. She climbed stairs on legs that shook, following the route Dmitri had drilled into her, heading toward the library where they'd shown her Victor. Twice she heard footsteps and hid, pressing herself into shadows while armed men ran past. Once, she stepped over a security guard she recognized from morning patrols, his eyes open and unseeing. The library door stood ajar. Lena pushed it open and found exactly what the camera had shown. Destruction, blood, and Victor Romano slumped against the wall, now alone. The armed guards mysteriously absent. A trap. Obviously a trap. She walked into it anyway. Lena. Victor's eyes opened when she knelt beside him. What part of stay in the room was unclear? The part where you expected me to hide while you died. She pressed her hands against the wound in his side, trying to slow the bleeding. How bad is it? Bad enough that telling you to run would be pointless. I can't exactly chase you. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. Dmitri will kill me for letting you out of that room. Dmitri's not here. I am. Exactly what they wanted. Victor's hand caught hers, his grip surprisingly strong. This was the plan all along. Make me care enough about you that you'd care back. Then use that against us.
Touching, Volkov's voice echoed from the doorway. Really, quite beautiful. Romano, I didn't think you were capable of genuine feeling. This is almost disappointing. I preferred you as a heartless bastard. He stepped into the library, flanked by two men Lena recognized from the restaurant, the scarred one and Mikhail with his academic glasses. Both armed, both wearing expressions that suggested the violence was far from over. Let her go, Victor said, his voice steady despite the blood loss. You wanted me vulnerable. You got it. She's not part of this. Oh, but she is. She became part of this the moment you let yourself care about her. Volkov crouched a few feet away, staying carefully out of Victor's reach. That's the thing about power, Romano. It's only meaningful if there's something you're afraid of losing. For years you had nothing. No family, no lovers, no attachments. You were untouchable because you had nothing worth touching. And now I do. Congratulations. What's your point? My point is watching you choose, Volkov gestured to Mikhail, who grabbed Lena and hauled her to her feet. She fought, but he was stronger, and the gun pressed against her temple ended her resistance immediately. Her life or your territory, the accounts you took from me, the operations you absorbed, the clients you stole, all of it, in exchange for Miss Parker walking out of here alive. Victor's expression remained neutral, but Lena saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Weighing options, measuring costs, deciding what she was worth. No deal, Victor said finally. Lena's heart stopped. No? Volkov raised an eyebrow. You'd let her die rather than surrender business interests. I'd let her die rather than surrender to you. Victor met Lena's eyes and something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or an apology. Because surrendering to you means you win, means you get the territory and kill us both anyway once you've consolidated power. At least this way, I die knowing you didn't get everything. Victor, Lena started, but Mikhail's hand clamped over her mouth. How very cold-blooded. Volkov stood, brushing off his knees. I'm almost impressed. Kill her. Mikhail's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the lights went out again. But this time, they went out deliberately, tactically, because Dmitri had been waiting for exactly the right moment, the moment when all of Volkov's attention was on Victor and Lena, when his men were focused on the hostages rather than the perimeter. The darkness lasted 3 seconds. When emergency lights flickered back on, Mikhail was dead on the floor, his throat cut with surgical precision. The scarred man had 2 bullets in his chest and was collapsing slowly, gun falling from nerveless fingers. And Dmitri stood behind Volkov with a knife pressed against the older man's kidney, his pale eyes promising death in multiple languages. Drop the weapon, Dmitri said quietly, or I paint this library with your organs. Volkov froze. The gun in his hand wavered. I said drop it. The weapon clattered to the floor. Additional security flooded in. Victor's people, bloodied but alive, weapons trained on Volkov from every angle. The battle was over, the assault team dead or captured. And Dmitri Volkov, patriarch of the Brighton Beach Bratva, stood with a blade against his spine and nothing left to bargain with. I told you to stay in the room, Dmitri said to Lena without looking at her. She saved my life, Victor corrected, wincing as he tried to stand. Medical personnel rushed forward, but he waved them off temporarily. By being exactly the bait we needed to draw them all into one place. Lena stared at him. You planned this? Not the getting shot part. That was improvisation. Victor's smile was pained. But yes, the rest of it. Letting them think they could use you against me. Letting them attack when they thought they had advantage. Using their assumptions about love and leverage to trap them instead. The blood loss monitor, the cameras showing you dying. Dmitri's work. He's very good with computers. Victor finally let the medic support him, his face gray with pain. I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you. Needed your reactions to be genuine when Volkov offered the trade. You used me. Yes. Let me out of the safe room knowing I'd come for you. Hoped you would. Wasn't certain. His eyes found hers across the destroyed library. But I was counting on you caring enough to be stupid, and you were. Lena should have been furious. Should have felt betrayed. Instead, she felt something closer to awe at the elaborate chess game Victor had played. Using her, yes, but also trusting her to play her part without knowing the script. What happens to him? She gestured at Volkov, still held immobile by Dmitri's knife. That depends on him.
Victor addressed Volkov directly. You attacked my home, killed my people, threatened someone under my protection. By the rules we all live by, I'm justified in ending you and everyone connected to you. You'll start a war, Volkov said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, I'll end one. You broke the peace first. Everyone will understand my response. Victor took a step closer, wincing with each movement. But I'm offering you a choice. Same one I offered Lena when this started, life or death. Choose quickly. What's the price for life? Everything. Your operations in my territory, all of it. Your accounts, your contacts, your distribution networks. You go back to Brighton Beach and stay there. You never mention my name. You never acknowledge this night existed. And you spend whatever years you have left knowing you lost to a man you thought you could break with sentiment. Volkov's jaw tightened. Pride warred with survival. Finally, survival won. Agreed. Good. Victor nodded to Dmitri, who released Volkov with visible reluctance. Get him out of my house. If I see him again, our agreement is void. They dragged Volkov away. The security team began the grim work of cleaning up the aftermath, documenting casualties, removing bodies, assessing damage. Medics finally convinced Victor to sit so they could properly treat his wound. Through it all, Victor's eyes tracked Lena with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. When the immediate chaos subsided, when the wound was bandaged and the library had been cleared of everyone except them, Victor spoke. You didn't have to come out of that room. Yes, I did. Why? Lena moved to stand in front of him, this man who'd kidnapped her, protected her, used her, trusted her. This criminal who'd somehow become the most important person in her carefully reconstructed life. Because somewhere between captivity and performance, this became real. For both of us. She touched his face, the gesture gentle despite everything. You said you didn't know when it happened. I do. It happened when you gave me the choice to leave that hotel suite, when you could have just taken what you needed but offered me agency instead. I still trapped you. You gave me options and let me choose. That's more freedom than I had working 3 jobs and pretending to be invisible. She smiled despite everything. Besides, you're not getting rid of me now. I just saved your life. You're stuck with me. Is that what you want? To stay stuck with a criminal who uses people as chess pieces? I want to stay with the man who protected me even when it made no strategic sense, who trained me to survive, who looked at me like I was worth more than my usefulness. Lena leaned closer, her forehead touching his. I want to choose this. Freely. Not because I'm trapped, but because I want to be here. Victor's hand came up to cup the back of her head, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like blood and smoke and something that might have been hope. When they finally broke apart, his smile was real, not the sharp, dangerous one he used as armor, but something genuine. I'm going to ask you something, he said quietly. And I need you to understand you can say no, that no is a complete answer. Ask, stay, not as captive or leverage or performance. Stay as my partner, equal. Someone I build this life with instead of someone trapped in it. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Marry me, Lena Parker. Choose me every day the same way you chose me tonight. Lena pulled back to look at him properly. This man covered in blood and exhaustion, and the evidence of the violence he'd orchestrated to protect her. The proposal should have been terrifying, should have been just another manipulation from a man who'd built his entire empire on controlling outcomes. Instead, it felt like the first truly free choice she'd made since stumbling through that wrong door. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. The recovery took weeks. Victor's gunshot wound was serious enough to require actual medical intervention from doctors who didn't ask questions about how their patient had acquired holes in inconvenient places. The estate underwent massive renovations, repairing damage, upgrading security, transforming from fortress into something that felt like an actual home. Lena moved out of her beautiful cage on the 3rd floor and into Victor's suite on the 2nd. Not because he demanded it, but because she chose it. Because waking up beside him felt right in a way that solitary luxury never had. She learned the business. Not just the surface details, but the actual mechanisms, how territories worked, how accounts were managed, how to read the city's underworld like a language she'd always known but never been taught to speak. Victor taught her with the patience of someone who understood that partnership meant genuine equality, not just the appearance of it. Mrs. Chen became an ally rather than a warden, teaching Lena the social intricacies of Victor's world with the same precision Dmitri had taught combat. The staff stopped looking through her and started seeing her as someone with authority, someone who mattered, someone who'd earned her place through blood and fire instead of just stumbling into it. The wedding was small, private, just Victor, Lena, Mrs. Chen and Dmitri as witnesses, and a judge who'd long since learned not to question Victor Romano's requests. Lena wore cream silk, not white, because pretending to innocence seemed dishonest after everything, and Victor wore the same dark suit he'd worn the night they met. "You could still run," he said as they stood before the judge. "Out the door, into the city. I'd let you go." "I know, that's why I'm staying." The judge pronounced them married. Victor kissed her like she was the only real thing in a world built on shadows and leverage, and Lena kissed back, choosing this life, this man, this future, with the same determination she'd shown climbing out of the safe room. The years that followed were not easy. Victor's world remained dangerous. Competitors challenged, territories shifted, violence erupted in patterns Lena learned to anticipate and navigate, but she faced it as partner rather than pawn. As someone who understood the game because she'd learned to play it, she legitimized parts of the operation Victor had always wanted clean, but never had the social capital to manage. Turned gambling operations into licensed casinos, transformed protection rackets into legitimate security firms, used her invisible person skills to move through rooms where Victor's reputation preceded him, gathering intelligence and building relationships. They were good together, better than good. The criminal and the catering assistant who'd stumbled into his suite and refused to be dismissed. The man who'd built an empire on control, and the woman who'd taught him that some things couldn't be controlled, only chosen. 3 years after the night Volkov's assault failed, Lena stood in the garden behind the estate, now truly a garden, with flowers she'd planted herself rather than the severe landscaping that had existed before. Victor found her there in the late afternoon sun, holding something in her hands that she'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes. "You're crying," he observed, moving to stand beside her. Not sad crying, different crying. Lena held up what she'd been holding, a pregnancy test, positive, undeniable. "We're going to have a baby." Victor stared at the test like it was in a foreign language, then at Lena, then back at the test. For a man who controlled one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Eastern Seaboard, he looked completely, endearingly lost. "You're sure?" "3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but yes, I'm sure." He sank onto the garden bench, pulling her down beside him. For a long moment, he just held her, his face buried in her hair, his body shaking slightly with something that might have been laughter or might have been tears. "I never—" he started, then stopped, started again. "I never planned for this. Never imagined it was possible. Are you upset?" "No, terrified maybe, but not upset." He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes bright with something Lena had never seen before. Joy, pure and uncomplicated. "You're going to make me a father. You're going to make me a mother, equally terrifying. We'll be terrible at it." "Probably," Lena laughed through her tears. "But we'll figure it out, same way we figured out everything else." Victor kissed her there in the garden, surrounded by flowers that proved even in his controlled world, things could grow wild and unexpected. The man who'd built his life on eliminating variables now faced the biggest variable of all, a child, unplanned, and perfect. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I don't think I've said that enough." "You show it every day, but hearing it doesn't hurt." Lena smiled. "I love you too, even though you kidnapped me and turned my life into a crime novel. You kidnapped yourself. I just offered you better accommodations than jail." "Romantic." "I try." They sat in the garden as the sun set over the city, talking about nurseries and names and how to raise a child in a world built on shadows, planning for a future that had started with a drunk girl stumbling through the wrong door and ended with a family neither of them had seen coming. The ruthless boss who'd controlled empires through fear and calculation now controlled nothing except his reaction to his wife's hand pressed against her still flat stomach. The invisible woman who'd spent her life serving people who never saw her now stood at the center of someone's entire universe. 6 years ago, Lena Parker had made a wrong turn that changed everything, had chosen captivity over death, performance over truth, safety over freedom. Now, sitting in a garden she'd planted herself, married to the man who'd once been her captor and was now her partner, carrying a child they'd made from choices instead of accidents, Lena realized the wrong door had been exactly right. Because some mistakes weren't mistakes at all. They were just the universe's violent way of putting people exactly where they needed to be. And she needed to be here, in this garden, with this man, building this future from the ashes of who they'd both been before that single drunken night rewrote both their lives forever.